Empowering listeners from the US to the UK. Live on air with Stephen Cuoco.
I have the distinguished pleasure of interviewing someone who is doing great deal of work. He's got enormous amount of credibility. And I read a comic recently. And I believe I haven't read a comic in well over, 4 decades, 35, 40 years ago. And it brought back so many memories. I was in my head remembering how those comic books felt. You know, the way you went through the pages, the smell. There's something about comic books to this day. It does not discriminate. There is no specific age group to a comic book, whether you're an illustrator, you're a writer, you are a graphic designer, or an avid reader, or all the above, or a fan. It meets to every age because the story can be whatever that story wants to be without any restriction whatsoever. We've got Michael. Michael, I'm going to bring you on. I know you told me, but I don't like to mispronunciate last names. Michael.
It's okay. Yeah, it's Michael Frizell. Not like Frizzle with the magic school bus. You know, everyone does it all the time, man. It's pretty easy to mispronounce.
Not Frizzle. Okay. He is the director of student learning services at Missouri State University. He holds a master's in theater and creative writing from Missouri State and an M.F.A. What is that?
Master of Fine Art.
Okay. You would think I would know that. I'm not used to things getting shortened anymore. I like it written out, and it looks good, though. But, yeah, I like that. In creative nonfiction from the University of Arkansas. His work has been published in National Gallery of Writing, Red Ink Journal, the Moon City Review, Saddlebag Dispatches, the Good Men Project. It goes on and on and on. But most importantly, you just got published, Michael, with TidalWave Productions. It's a Travis Kelce book, Fame, the Travis Kelce book. It's incredible. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to honestly say it would have. I wanted to touch those pages. It was that great where I'm honored to have had the opportunity to read it in digital format. I can only imagine what the print version has got to look like.
You know, I want to see it myself. I haven't received my print version yet.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, we do everything digital nowadays, right? So we're swapping files back and forth and taking a look and then approving things as it goes. And eventually when it gets printed, it comes around. But we've been selling out in a lot of locations pretty fast, so I'm not surprised.
The artwork and the cover is incredible. Can you take us into what exactly, to break it down, were you part of the artwork? Were you part of the creative direction of it? What was going on?
Well, the way these work is that I'll write a script, and then it goes through an approval process with our editing, and then, of course, Darren Davis, the publisher of TidalWave. And then he'll assign an artist, and that artist could be anywhere in the world. He's got several different countries we're working with and people in different locations. I've worked with this artist before, and so, you know, because I knew him so well, I just kind of wrote the script with him in mind. It makes it a little easier to do it that way. But really, when it comes to the art, I just have to kind of get out of the way. So when you write these scripts, you write them in such a way to give the artist room. So I don't know if you've ever seen a script before for a comic book. It could be kind of confusing to read. Have you ever seen one?
Never, and I would love to.
Yeah, Martin M.A.s was the illustrator for this. And what I do is, when you think about someone like Travis Kelce, the first thing you want to do is start doing some heavy research. I got to figure out who he is. I mean, I can see it on television. If I followed sports more, I probably would have had an easier time with the research. But understanding who Travis Kelce was as a person was more important to me than, say, how he did in the last game, you know. And as I start writing the script, based on the research, I look at his past, where he's come from, where he went to school, why he was inspired to do certain things. Then I'll find a controversy about him sometimes, something that makes him a little more human and grounds him. Because you and I, we're probably not going to be able to go out on the field and be a tight end like this guy, And so I want to find that human way into his story and then tell a story that makes a lot of sense so that we can get up to where he is today. The issue with this is then the artist has got to interpret what I'm writing too, right? So you write the script in several ways. First, you can do an outline. Then I think of the script in 100 pictures. So a comic book's about 22 pages, roughly 5 pictures per page and a couple splash pages, which is one big picture. That means you got 100 photos that you got to deal with. So I take those 100 ideas and I throw them out and I rearrange it to add some tension, and then I describe in detail every picture that I want the artist to start thinking about drawing. But giving Martin, in this case Martin M.A.s, enough room so he could do his own thing. Then I do the dialogue and add tension in that way, and then we start talking to the colorist. You get the idea. There's just a lot of layers here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I do, yeah. Oh, you didn't have to stop. I'm enjoying this. I'm seeing it in my head as you're explaining it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't want your listeners to have to listen to me drone on too long. I mean, my students are like, come on, Michael, stop. But writing a comic book isn't like anything else I've ever done before. When you write strict prose or something like in a novel or a short story, it flows in a different way. Here you're actually writing for a visual medium. A lot of people have tried to describe it as like writing a screenplay, but I don't agree with that at all, because screenplays are normally action shots, moving shots, things that are happening the way that the camera needs to go. And here they're all still pictures. Yet you somehow got to have movement. You got to have this idea that between the panels something is happening. And so it takes a lot of skill from the artist to kind of interpret what I'm saying. And in the case of Martin, I was really happy with that we assigned him the role. He's a fantastic artist. He gets the idea of how to tell the story well. So even if I screwed up, he makes me look good, Mm-hmm. And that made me pretty happy about it. We only had one mandate when we were writing this script, usually, well, 2 in this case. Darren Davis always says to me, Michael, no matter who the subject is, we got to focus on the positive of this person, because you consider who your reader's going to be. It's likely going to be somebody who's interested in the Kansas City Chiefs, or in this case, maybe Taylor Swift's boyfriend, whoever it is. You want to keep that positive and happy, and at the same time, you want to depict a real person, so it can't read like a Wikipedia page. It can't be that static and boring. You've got to tell a story. So early on, when I started thinking about Travis's story, the first thing I did was I called my old college roommate up. My college roommate, his name's Novi Foland, and he's got this, he works in Columbia, Missouri. He's a car salesman, but he and his wife are so into the Chiefs that he's got a tattoo of the Chiefs. His family gets together on the weekends. They all wear red on Fridays. You get the idea. And I messaged him and said, hey, tell me about Travis. Tell me anything that you can remember. And it ended up that the first scene of the book was exactly what he remembered, that Travis had been kicked off his college team once, and he had to kind of redeem himself, and his brother helped along with that. I thought, that's a great story. We got this guy who everyone's looking up to right now, and he stumbled in college in a way that pretty much got him kicked off the team. Loved to open that way. So that's why we opened the book. Later, what I wanted to show then was a redemption of that. Like, can he grow up? Can he get out of his own way and become the player that he hopes to be? And that's where I wanted the comic to go. And so when I started to kind of conceptualize what that would look like, the first thing I needed to do was make sure I was on the right track by reading a lot of interviews with him and then watching a lot of footage just of him talking about his past and his career to see if I'm on the right track, and then you try to capture his voice. You could tell it probably takes a while to do the research. I think in this case, we had a shortened timeline. Let me look at my timeline. It was about 3 weeks of writing, and then Martin knocked that out in a few weeks with the art, and then we were done about a week prior to the Super Bowl. And the publisher then messaged me and he says, I'm thinking about holding off until March, releasing it then. Because we were in the midst of all this publicity with Taylor Swift. The company had published a Taylor Swift comic from another writer, and he was just drowning in publicity with it. I'm like, no, don't do it right now. And not only is it on the heels of this Taylor Swift comic, but it's also right before the Super Bowl. I said, I hate to say this out loud and put it out in the world, but what if they lose? And he's like, you're right, and we got it out there. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the story behind the book and how we started, conceptualizing what it would look like.
When we think about the fact in the book, the Chiefs win, was that premeditated, or how was this accomplished at the last minute?
What do you mean?
Because I believe in the book, the Chiefs win. I'm in the book right now.
Oh yeah, we added a page at the end.
Okay, that's what
we added a page at the end on that.
Because you never know. I mean, someone may think to themselves, "Is this sci-fi here? Are you going or using some type of time warp or machine or something?" Like how was this book published where the Chiefs won, yet the Super Bowl didn't finish yet? And they won. You know what I'm saying? Anyone can come up with something, and they may just think you're some fortune teller.
Well, that's funny, because there's been a few books where I've written in the past where I kind of predicted what might happen in the future, and it did work.
See?
But in this case, because we did this through Amazon first, you can easily edit. So I think it dropped on Amazon the Wednesday or Tuesday prior to the Super Bowl. And then when they won, he updated the book with that page at the end with the winner. And so I think that's the kind of the process that happened there. It was one of those last-minute additions that just seemed to cap it off well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but no, I mean, originally I didn't even think of it that way. I was more concerned about telling Travis's story and a little less concerned about who won.
And see, that's the first thing I got from that, Michael, is like, I was impressed how the book ended, and I thought this could make for a great story. Michael could end up being a go-to to where he's prophesizing events before they happen, just like that movie that's coming out, that woman who wrote the book. Do you remember seeing that? I forget. She wrote a book, and every time she writes a book, everything happens.
Oh, that's funny.
I wish I could remember the name of it.
I can't either. I don't even know. There is one time that I did predict the winner, and it got me in trouble a little bit.
Why? No.
All right. I wasn't going to tell you, but now I'm going to do it because here we are, right? And I've already led us down this path. So I've been writing with TidalWave for about 10 years, and early on, I had some pretty nice and pretty cushy gigs. Like one of my first published comics was on Christopher Reeve after his passing, and the Reeve Foundation really liked it. We added some pages for them, and that kind of started my career. Like, oh, well, Michael can do this research, and he's got a pretty good voice for this. And so I've been getting good gigs. Well, in the 2016 election, we wrote heavily on the Republicans because we had Democrats coming down, Republicans probably rising toward the presidency, so we started hitting all of the candidates. We do that every year. Like in the 2020 election, we did that. We focused on the opposite side. So you get the idea, right? Mm-hmm. It's either Democrats or Republicans. We're focusing on it. The publisher called me and said, how do you feel about writing about Donald Trump? Well, they had already had a comic on Donald Trump years before he'd run. And it had his background information. So, it's just like his life and history. So I was then regulated to just the election. And at that time, he'd just come down the escalator. There was a lot of controversy behind the scenes. It was just a lot of noise, right? And then, talk radio went nuts. I didn't know how to approach it because I had a really short time frame to write about. And we wanted to get it out before, the election day. I think I had a few weeks. And I had written a bunch of the other Republican pieces at that point, so I was pretty steeped in the research, but I just didn't know what to do. So I wrote a book on Trump, but not from his point of view at all. I wrote it from a Midwestern voter, just a generic guy. Why would you then vote for somebody? You know, what's drawing you toward this person? And yeah, I mean, it was okay. I explored it for a while. I felt like it felt fine. And at the end, I realized I have to predict a winner. The story took me there, so I predicted he'd win. And I submitted it. I didn't think they'd publish it. I thought Tyler would go, nah, we really want to focus on him. But he went ahead and published it anyway. And the day of the election, when they announced the winner, I got a call from like several magazines, Time Magazine being one, in my office saying, "How did you predict that?"
Wow.
And I said, well, my secretary was freaking out because I'm like, why are these newspapers calling us? I said, because this idiot, your boss, just went ahead and predicted the winner and had no idea. It was just where the story took me. So I never did that again. Never did that again.
How was that experience for you, though? Were you scared? Were you concerned? Or I find it exciting.
A little bit of both, I guess. It's easy to sit in my office and write and not even think about what happens after, and if I was doing that for accolades or thinking that I'm any good at this, I would just quit. I'm much more interested in the process and the art of it, coming up with something to say, finding a way to say it that makes it a little more exciting or fun, even if it's just for me in some cases. In that case, I mean, the politics aside, let's not even think about the politics, because I don't want to go down that path. We were talking about Travis Kelce and sports, but when I think about telling the story of somebody like that, when I was a kid, I never really thought much of the guy. I always felt like, here's a rich kid who's, kind of the epitome of excess, and, I just had zero desire to do it. But when my publisher asks and asks nicely, I do it every time, because he's got this way, man. I don't know. If you've never really talked to him, he's got a way of not only figuring out what people are interested in reading, but he's got a timing that is impeccable. I've never seen anyone like this. The Taylor Swift comic, even though I didn't write this one, is a great example. It dropped the same day Time Magazine announced her as Woman of the Year. We couldn't have predicted that. What in the world? Yet there it was. So when he's saying, hey, write a comic about this politician or this artist, I do it. I don't want to diminish from the fact that it is kind of exciting, but also having the news call you about politics is kind of freaky. It's kind of like this. I don't follow it as well as I should, and when I research these subjects, I just dive deep into what they're saying about themselves rather than what others say about them. And I try to source it in 2 or 3 different ways to make sure it's as accurate as possible. And I don't really think about what the impact will be until well after. Like you said, you enjoyed reading the Kelce book, and that made me happy because I never really think about it. I know that sounds strange, but I don't. The same goes true for some of the books I've written in the past. Like I've had little kids write the publisher and say it's my favorite comic, or I love this, and that touches me more than Time Magazine calling me about a Donald Trump prediction that I just made because the story went there. You know what I mean?
I'm going to say what you deserve, Michael, are the accolades. Even if something seems to be a blimp or a bloop, whatever it is, the attention's on you. And I would say from a publicist journalist perspective,
Sure.
If you were to call me and say I'd have a conversation, or even if your representative, Darren, had called me like, Stephen, this is what I would be like, ride with it. Do a plug-in. Is Michael coming out with another book? Is he planning on writing a sequel to something? What's happening? Like, it would have been, and it is, and if that were to ever happen again, plug it in.
You are right.
We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars worth of free press media. You can't go wrong with that, especially with the whole pay-to-play scam that's going on right now.
Oh, man, you are not kidding. No, you're right. You're right. And I think that's where Darren kind of excels, is that he's he's got it. Well, he used to work for E! Entertainment Television. He's done a lot of stuff in the past where he was in touch with a lot of different styles of presenting information. I think he's good at that, and maybe I'm not as much. I was trained as a faculty member, teach reading. Now I run a learning center. I didn't really think about marketing myself. I always feel like I do the work. I do as good a job as I can do, and I move on. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that we're continuing to work on more books. You know, I'm hoping that the Travis Kelce book does well enough that I can do a sequel. I'd love for Darren to greenlight, you know, a book on Mahomes, because I feel like it would be a nice bookend to that. I know I've already worked on some scripts for possible sequels to the Taylor Swift comic that was published. You know, there's always something in the works. I'm looking at my list. I'm going on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books simultaneously, trying to get, you know, things out in an order that he feels comfortable with, so that we can keep the artist busy and employed, and at the same time doing things that, you know, readers want to see. So see, here I am. Even after you said all those nice things, I'm still downplaying the fact about the accolades, and I think part of that, and I don't know if you've suffered from this or not, but I get imposter syndrome really bad. It's always been a thing for me. I feel like, wow, I did that? I surely not. I've published over 100 of these with TidalWave and gotten all kinds of press. And I still am amazed anytime anyone calls and says, hey, can we talk? Shocks me.
My answer to that is I completely understand where you're coming from. I can't relate in that way, because you're a writer and I'm working PR and I'm media and journalist. So I understand what the attention to light and that spot, or more specifically, that spotlight means. So I always encourage for you to stay in there. I will add however, what I do understand personally in my own career, because I'm also in the spotlight as talent, so I do understand this area, is I wouldn't say it would be imposter syndrome. I just know that with the people I've worked with having been in this industry for over 30 years, there is always going to be an ally and there will always be an adversary. And what I've learned in my career through people who have tried to play power trip with me, or just power moves, is that's where I can say I can relate to you. I don't fear the spotlight, but I know that the people that are closest to me and the people that at times I've assumed that have been my allies in life have turned out to be my adversaries. And that's where it's like it gets uncomfortable, because you don't want someone else to take your truth and spin it into a TMZ story, even though there are people out there that will do it.
Oh, you're not wrong, and I think that's an interesting point that you make, and well taken. You know, I don't always fear the spotlight as much as I'm always wondering how I'm going to react to it. You know, I was a professional actor for about 10 years before I went into higher ed, and got burned out really fast just being on stage and always in the spotlight of some sort, doing commercials and bad movies where I end up on the cutting room floor. I preferred the live stage so that I could leave and it never returns. Like, I can do the work, have fun with the job, and then get out. I hated curtain calls. I hated that sort of thing. It's never been part of me. So I think that translated a little bit when I started writing more, in that it's like, how do you accept good, positive feedback? And I talk to my students about it, and they seem to understand it a lot better than I do in a lot of ways. It's like, well, how do you deal with it? And so when it comes to writing, it's such an isolating thing. You know, you're just alone in the room, and I don't even share the work until it's done normally. Sometimes we're on an accelerated schedule with the publisher, and he'll say, like, I'm working on one right now. The artist is ready to do something, so I'm sending him the book in sequences so that the storytelling is preserved, but I'm not sending him the whole story yet. So I have to be really careful how I describe this so that we don't miss something in the art translation. And the accelerated timeline is just because we had a great idea and we felt like now is the time, so we did it. But for me, it's so isolating to think, all right, I'm writing here, and when it's done, it'll be out in the world in a few months, and I've already moved on to the other project. With Travis Kelce, it's only been a few weeks since I was actually finished, and then it was dropped almost immediately because Martin is so fast as an artist, and we were ready to go. And so it's still fresh in my mind, the writing process on that one, but sometimes people call me for these interviews. I'm like, I don't remember. You know, it's a tough thing to do because I'm always doing it. I tell my students, if you want to be a better writer, you've got to write every day. I write 3 or 4 hours a day, every day, on vacation, on weekends, at night, in front of the TV, whatever it is that when it needs to get done, it gets done. And I've done that for years, over 20 years easily. And I have files and files of stuff that sometimes it's junk, never use it again. Sometimes I'll use parts of it. Sometimes I'll use it all. And then with comic books, especially if you're telling like nonfiction stories like the Travis Kelce book or even the Trump book I mentioned, those are like done in one. And then if you get a sequel, then we've got to start from where we left off and pick up their timeline there. So those can be challenging, but when you're writing about real people in real situations, the best part is their story is there. You just got to find a way in so that your reader can relate to them rather than just the hype behind them. But other comics, you know, like science fiction stuff that we did with Stormy Daniels, of all things, you know, we tell a long-form story that took 11 issues to tell. And so there was always something happening during that time. If this makes any sense at all, I don't want to ramble on, but you get the idea.
I like the details, and what you're doing is you're helping us, even me and the listeners, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in on Live on Air with Stephen Cuoco on Biz Talk Radio, biztalkradio.com, and Power 98.5 Satellite Radio, power985.com. When we think about legality, do you or your publisher, do you have to get approval? Like what I would like to learn, you know, in comparison or potential, the way it could relate to script and TV and film, do you have to run it by the management or agencies at all? Or do you have the free will to do like what you did with the book Fame, Travis Kelce? Can you just write it based on the objective facts that you have found online, through your interpretation, through your fact check and all that, and that's it? Or do you have to go through other red tape?
In the case of the Kelce book, it'd be the former, the way you described it, right? We can do whatever you like because of you know, freedom of the press, that sort of thing. But we always prefer to have their participation. And I'll give you a really good example on why it strengthens it when you get it. So first, if we pick a topic, the publisher will reach out to their people. Sometimes we get responses and sometimes we don't, right? It happens. And when they work with us, it really does make it easier to do the fact checking and to make sure that we're interpreting it in the way that the artist, musician, personality wants it, right? But if not, we'll go ahead anyway. So like with some of the politicians, they've jumped in and said, we want this, we can use this at rallies and whatever. And those are great because then they send you pages and pages of notes. And, you know, you get to work from that and then double check it rather than worrying about, am I right? Am I spending hours and hours watching footage for a reason? In the case of like Kelce, we could reach out all we wanted, but the timing was probably bad. I'm sure he was a little busy, right? But the best example that we've got on this one was probably most recent with Stormy Daniels, and everyone knows who she is. Mm-hmm. Pretty infamous for who she is. And as an adult entertainer, she was wanting to change her her personality, her look, a little bit at the time. We had written I didn't write this one or illustrated, a writer and illustrator named Joe Paradise did this, where he wrote about the Trump scandal with Stormy as a short biography. And her people got it, and she had suggestions for changes that she wanted to make because some of the facts weren't quite lining up the way that, it really did in real life. And so Darren had me go in and rewrite parts of the script to suit Stormy. And then Stormy wrote a foreword to the comic that basically talked about her perspective on this, which was very cool, right? So now you've got the engagement of the celebrity you're working with, and then she liked what we were doing so much that she asked us to pitch a fiction comic about her to kind of make her a superhero thing. And Darren and I and a couple other writers came together, and we pitched Stormy Daniels' Space Force, and she's basically fighting a disembodied Trump, giant projection of him in the future, where in the 23rd century, starships are lined up on two different sides. Trump's got a space force that's a military and a space force that's a pirate arm that's kind of plundering the galaxy. And she's a pirate captain where she's her, and he's always trying to thwart her. And she's got this ragtag crew going around, and they were fighting against a planet that was all women bent on destroying Earth. And then after we finished the first story arc, I got to fly solo as the writer on this and really start to explore it. So it became kind of a political parody, a Star Trek parody, and definitely a play on who she was as a person now in the 21st century. And then how would she be, projected into the future? We had so much fun that we did 11 issues, a special crossover with the superhero comic. That was a great fun to write. And then I just wrote a kind of a special edition one-shot that picks up the story where it left off so we can keep going. And Stormy gets approval. She gets to, check it out. She sells it on her website, signed copies. These kind of partnerships are fantastic because not only are you getting a better book out of the deal, but you're getting her actual involvement. So we try to do both. In a lot of cases, sometimes these celebrities are just so hard to get that they don't find out about it until well after the fact, and then we do a follow-up. I mean, why not? Anything to keep that engagement high, and, it's been a lot of fun to do. Darren Davis, the publisher, usually handles all that with his manager behind the scenes, and as the writer, I just pick up the contracts I want to do and cut loose. It's really been fun.
It's awesome.
I hope that answered your question.
It does, and I appreciate the details. Love the details. And I went in and did some research, and I vaguely remember this. I can neither confirm or deny it, but I believe that I do recall seeing these graphics. I had to have. I mean, there's no way that this was kept silent. And I will say that representatives, for the most part, are horrible to get a hold of, no matter what industry the person's in. And what's the point of having a manager or a PR agent if there's no communication back or a lack thereof to be able to get a hold of these people, because they're in the public eye, and that's their responsibility as representatives in making sure that there's some sort of efficiency behind the lens, and there's not.
I think you're right. You do your best, and then we move on and do the things that we feel would do service to it. And I did a Prince comic once that got so much so much attention on it before he died, that I actually went on the radio with a DJ in his hometown and helped him spin records from my office in Missouri. He's over there in his state, and we're spinning records and talking about Prince. Weird things come out of these comics in ways that I never expected. I mean, what in the world am I doing DJing? I'm just like, I thought Prince was cool when I was the 80s, and, dating was great to have his music too, what, I don't know. And they were spinning these records, and we were just having a blast reminiscing about it. And after he passed, we added a few pages to it and re-released it as a tribute to him. And I tell you, just writing these books sometimes, it can be moving, it can be challenging, it can be scary. I don't take on topics that I don't want to do. I kick myself for ones I should have done, probably. I turned down the Taylor Swift book the first time around, so I thought, there's enough about her out there. I'm not interested. And then it went viral. So all this was like, "Hey, Michael, I told you." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I should never doubt you." And so, crafting a sequel for her that book makes sense. Just lots of stuff.
I believe this is that I don't have an opinion about Taylor Swift.
Wow.
You
may be one of the first.
I probably am, because honestly, we're understanding, probably because we're in the industry and I understand how their careers are built. And I see Taylor as being more of a product. And I'm going to honestly say, and I hope her reps end up hearing this, I'm going to honestly say that when I think about her as a human being, I don't know who she is. And I am not convinced she knows who she is in the world, maybe behind the scenes, but I have no idea in a public eye. And it's a conversation I would need to have directly with her to have any understanding at all about it.
Well, right now her public persona is, she's dating the popular guy on the football team, and she's made $1 billion on her tour, and, she donates to charities everywhere she goes. And I didn't know much beyond that in a couple songs, but when I started doing research to talk about her philanthropy and things like that in the sequel comic, I found it very moving. And more so, I'm like you. I'm not interested in product people. I'm not interested in those who, your parents were in the business. Now they're grooming you all your life to be this special actor and look at your special eyes out in the world. I have zero interest in it. I like people who have fought for what they have, who had to battle all the noise to get heard. Writing about those things is much more interesting than somebody who's packaged in product. In Taylor's case, when I started researching her as a person, just to talk about her philanthropy and the things that she did, you could Google this at any point, and there's videos everywhere on YouTube and TikTok and other places. I don't tend to use TikTok much, but they're all over there. They basically showing some of the things that she's done with her celebrity and money that they don't always talk about. And I always wonder why they don't. I mean, you're right. Wouldn't that alter her image a little? Right now, she's getting a lot of pushback from certain circles because of who she supports or doesn't support for a presidential office and the politics behind all that. I have zero interest in any of that. She's a person. She can make her own decisions. You know what I mean? My interest in writing about these people is when I find out that they're facing some adversity and yet they overcome, or challenges that they face that make them a better artist. Or in this case for Taylor, the things that she did with her money, that she's so willing to help people, that I honestly, and I'm not pandering to her, I swear to you, but I was sitting here in my office watching this video of her bringing Christmas gifts to this kid, and it choked me up. I'm like, okay, I might be jaded, but that was something. She drove, with her team all the way to Connecticut, give this kid presents. I mean, come on. It was hard for me not to have the opinion after that. But you're right. The original comic I had zero interest in, because I'm really not interested in the product type person. I'm just not.
Michael, this is awesome. I have a feeling we can probably have an 1.5-hour show.
Probably. I told you I talk too much.
No, it works for me. It works for me. Don't ever apologize. Not for you being
right
on my
on,
show.
man.
It gives us good cause to have you come back on again. I want to thank you for being with us today.
Man, I appreciate it. It was fun to talk to you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in to Live on Air with Stephen Cuoco on Biz Talk Radio. Remember, you can connect with me and send me an email if you'd like to be a guest. UnitedAngelsDream@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone.